Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Courageous Curiosity Podcast. I'm Superintendent Ben Mainka here for the Novi Community School District, and I'm really excited about today because to my right and left, I have two giants in the field of educational technology and research. And if you were, to put it in perspective, if we were at a national education conference, these two gentlemen would be keynote speakers, each of them in their own right, and they are both here in our school district to talk about the future of learning. And we have been very curious, as you know, for those of you that have watched this show, about things that are impacting our kids, things that are impacting education in general. And so today we get to have this conversation with two people that are just experts in their fields, in this field of education. And so we're going to talk about the future of learning. So excited to have you both here. I'd love to have each of you just talk a little bit about your background, kind of how you enter the space. We have Dr. Joseph South with us, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at ISTE. And I know that for a lot of people, they might not understand what that acronym is, but if you're an educator, you've probably been to the ISTE conference. And so I'm sure that we'll touch on that. And Dr. Yong Zhao, who we've had the benefit of working with for a number of years. You as a self-proclaimed, I like the word you used last time, you're a friend of Novi, doing tons and tons of research historically for our field, for our profession, and just a really innovative thinker around education. And so today we get to talk about the future of learning and what that looks like. I'd love for each of you to just be able to give a little sense of your background and kind of how you enter the space. So Dr. South, if we could start with you.
Sure. So I'm really happy and excited to be here. Yeah. My background is actually in learning design. I studied learning science and how to use technology effectively combined with effective pedagogy. I had the opportunity to work at the national level at the U.S. Department of Education, where I led the Office of Educational Technology for the country.
Wow.
Which was an exciting opportunity.
Incredible.
And spent a little time at IDEO, which is a really amazing human-centered design firm. They're famous for having designed the first Apple mouse.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love that thing.
Yes.
It just works with the swipe of your finger. That's awesome.
Exactly. And now I'm with ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education. Many people have heard of the ISTE standards, which are just a set of competencies that every state has adopted to guide what they do. And we just merged with another organization called ASCD, which is focused on pedagogy. And so really we're trying to bring the technology conversation together with the pedagogy conversation.
Yeah, they're so intricately linked, and obviously technology impacts everything. And I know we're going to get into that today, but so grateful to have you here. And Dr. Zhao, love to have you just give a little bit of your background for those that might be watching.
All right. Well, as I said before, I'm a friend of Novi Community Schools. I used to be a professor at the Michigan State University for quite a long time, about 15 years. And then I went to University of Oregon, then University of Kansas. But overall, I think I have quite a diverse background in educational settings. I came out of China. I was educated in China, taught in China. They held positions in the UK and in Australia, and have had a chance to work with many, many schools to help them innovate and change, and really to rethinking a lot of the issues in education. For example, I say you have this title, evidence-based learning. That's just something I love. I wrote a book about it. It's called, what is, the book is called What Works May Hurt.
Okay.
Side effects in education. So it depends on what evidence. This evidence, shows test scores go up, but kids may feel unhappy.
Sure.
Sure. And some scores might destroy creativity. So I would love to have this conversation with you.
I love that. And I think the other thing that you bring on top of all that you've researched and thought about is this idea that, the United States educational system is one educational system. And we certainly know that we do not have all of the answers and we don't have it all right. But you bring that background of just a diversity of schools all over the world, that you visited and have collaborated with. So I'm going to start with one that is kind of a big question, and I want to just kind of ground it in this. People that might be watching this, they might have children of their own. One of the things we say all the time is that everyone's an expert in school because they all went to school at some point, right? And so as an educator, oftentimes you'll have a parent that will be portraying, well, that wasn't the experience I had in school. And so that sometimes ends up being the expectations of the community of the school, right? So we could talk ad nauseum about the structure and how, we've got a school system that's based around an agricultural calendar and all of these other types of things. But certainly what we do know is that school and the way that students are going to learn is going to change with the advent of tremendously new, powerful technology and artificial intelligence, with what we now know about the way that the brain develops and all of these other types of things. So what I'm kind of just putting out there for either of you to kind of take to start out with, the average person that might think about school has a perspective of what school is. And maybe from each of your own perspectives, could you share what you think might be looking a little different in the future now as we start to think about what's coming for our children and for our future generations that are entering a workforce that is largely unknown?
Go ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
Well, so thanks for giving us a small question to
Yeah, exactly. I thought I'd start really granular.
So I think one big change that's coming is there's been so much emphasis on knowledge acquisition. And that's the discipline-based approach that we take to school, where there's science here and math here and social studies there. And in the future, and really in the present, we need to be much more interdisciplinary in how we engage learning, because that is how you actually live life and work.
Sure.
And so I think bringing that together is one big change. The second is, related to that, with the rise of artificial intelligence, we've sort of thought that this domain knowledge is what sets us apart and makes us different. But artificial intelligence is actually really good at domain knowledge. It's really good at math. It's really good at social studies. It's really good at science. What it's not good at is the human skills. It's not good at empathy. It's not good at the sort of flexibility that is required to get along with people. And it doesn't understand things like persistence or learning from failure, really. And so those skills, which I like to think of as human skills, are going to be much more necessary to be emphasized.
Yeah.
We talk about them now. We kind of put them in the background, and we put the discipline learning in the foreground. We're going to need to flip those.
That's super interesting. Yeah. And part of our strategic plan here in the district, we recently completed a profile of a graduate, and they are those, as you call them, human skills, but they're things like empathy. They're things like problem solving, creativity, right? These are what human beings can still bring to the table and likely will be able to bring to the table in the foreseeable future.
Well, I think, for me, the biggest problem with traditional schools is that we want students to be the same. I think that's, for over 200 years, the state-mandated curriculum or district-mandated curriculum has become the norm. And which was reasonable. I mean, think about 200 years ago, even 100 years ago, 50 years ago. What jobs there are, and those jobs do exist for a long time. And you can mandate students to learn, and also it's very basic. Everybody could learn. I mean, you go work for Henry Ford, 1920s or 30s. That's
sure.
But now it's different. I think with the emergence of AI or possible AGI is that we need really people to become themselves, individual greatness. If individuals can become great in their own way. So I'm always curious to ask, as a superintendent yourself or your staff, ask them, all the work you're trying to do so hard to teach students, to make sure everybody understands this. But are you sure what you try to teach will matter in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah.
That's really the biggest question. I think how much student autonomy you want to give and how much control you want to have. I think it's a very, very interesting question.
It's a very important question. And, we talk about be yourself. We talk about mental health. We talk about all of those things, and we acknowledge their importance. Yet when it comes down to it, as you were talking about, departmental, knowledge acquisition still reigns supreme, right? And so both of you have talked a little bit about artificial intelligence, and I want to come back to that for a second. Teachers everywhere are struggling with this topic because you've probably all seen the different graphs of, if I have artificial intelligence, for example, generative AI, produce something, and then I turn that in and say that's my own work, then we can all acknowledge that's probably not the most effective way. And we could say that could be considered cheating, right? Like this is a conversation that's happening. But there's a large continuum from that point all the way down to not using artificial intelligence at all. And within that continuum, we have a lot of space that teachers are navigating and trying to figure out. And so how do we help not only educators, but parents and students kind of understand that these skills and tools are going to be requirements really for the future of our economies and our jobs?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways into that question. I mean, for sure, there's been, of course, international studies, one from Goldman Sachs, that 18% of the workforce is subject now to automation because of AI. That's 20% of the jobs will simply be automated. There's another one that roughly 1 in 5 workers will see half of their jobs impacted. So that means that whatever you're doing as a superintendent today, about half of it will be different because of AI.
Sure.
So I think, one, we have to understand this is not niche technology that's going away. This is something that's going to be with us.
Yeah.
2, the cheating thing comes up so often, but there was a study, a Stanford study, and they've actually been tracking cheating longitudinally. They do a survey every year, and they've done it for decades. And when they ran the survey post-Gen AI, the percentage of students who cheat didn't change.
Wow.
So they use different tools to cheat.
Sure.
But the ones who were going to cheat still cheat.
Yeah, so it's really an integrity issue more than it is a tool issue. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I think once you pull that back and you realize that this isn't a conduit for cheating per se, it's a powerful tool. And so whatever you're trying to do with it, you're going to be able to do better, and you're going to be able to do it faster.
You know, I'm always curious about, why do people cheat? I used to do research on this. So why do people cheat? First of all, they really don't care. They don't care what you ask them to do. So why do schools ask people to do things they don't care? If students, if they don't care, they don't want to put the effort in, but they want the outcome. They don't want to be punished, so they cheat, right? And so today, if schools are teaching children meaningful things, if they're asked to do meaningful things, they don't want to cheat. Because there's no competition. If we remove that part, they don't have to cheat. So I think it's when the teachers, they have to decide what to teach, what requirements, what homework, what testing. I think this is a rethinking about what learning is. Because I think traditionally we always think learning is I teach you something, you regurgitate it back to me so you can pass. But really, that makes a lot of kids unhappy and disengaged. So if we can engage children, they probably would not cheat.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I think you're talking about the kind of what drives you, what's your passion. If I'm passionate about something, I'm going to want to learn about it. I'm going to want to engage in it. So how do I square that with external pressures from parents, community members that are pointing and saying the colleges and universities don't really care about that. What they care about is what's the SAT score say? What's the bottom line on how many AP classes or IB classes I took? How do I square that in my mind? Or if I'm a parent that's making that statement, right? Those pressures still exist, and I want that for my child. Yeah, I want my kid to be happy. That's important. And the level of importance for some parents, it varies, right? But I think what we can agree on is that we do have these external pressures. So how do we square some of where I think we need to go and shift the conversation in light of kind of what is acceptable in the eyes of the public?
I think, a big thing with parents or government officials or policymakers is that I think they need to really understand, first of all, their past is not their children's future. And whatever experiences they had do not replicate in the children's future. The second thing is that, honestly, today, a lot of our parents have no understanding of their children's life. They think they can mandate, And the third thing I think is really interesting, I've been thinking a lot about, if a child truly resists what do you want them to do, they just say, I give up. What are you going to do? I think a lot of children, maybe in Nova district, are nice kids, good ethical kids. They will listen to their parents. They will do something. But private, they might be pursuing something drastic and different. And the final point I want to say, I really think a lot of children's potential have been wasted by parental wishes and school wishes. A child can do a lot more without the control, but yet we control that. I've seen a lot of people, this generation of kids, you have people, the parents always predefine. You go to the school, you go to Harvard, you go to Princeton, you come out with a good job. But that job may be gone.
Yeah.
That job may be gone. Actually, a lot of kids don't, they regret that they've gone there. But instead, that child may say, I'm going to do this. If you look at in the U.S., the major technology innovations, most of them are done by people who drop out of school, right? Who drop out of college, who drop out of graduate program. I would say the majority of them, have a lot to do. But why don't we cultivate our children to be that creative, that entrepreneurial person?
Yeah, and for those parents who are really focused on college admission, I think it's important to realize that the academy is also changing in what they're looking for. And if you want an example, the Common App is the most widely used way to apply for college, and they have an essay question every year. And the essay question this year says, "What is something unique about you that your application would be incomplete if we didn't know about it?"
Wow.
That's not saying what's your SAT score, which, by the way, most colleges have even dropped the SAT as a requirement. Many of them won't even look at your SAT score. They actively say they will not consider your SAT score.
Wow.
Right? So I think as a parent, just as Yong was saying, you grew up in a particular moment when SAT scores ruled. Like that's when I went to college.
Sure.
That is all that mattered. And now colleges are looking much more broadly. And I think part of the reason is that a student who is only there because they got the A's for their parents is not a happy student, and they tend to drop out and they don't finish. And that's not good for the college, and it's not good for the student.
Yeah. Well, I have kind of an interesting kind of tag onto what you were talking about. I love the line that you had said there, and I don't know if it was intentional or if it was just this pearl of wisdom that you threw out there, but I love the line, parents have to realize that their children's future is not their past, right? And I think that's such an important statement. I see it in all walks of life. I have a son who plays sports, and my wife and I were athletes and things like that, but we don't necessarily require that he do that, but that's something that a lot of parents, I think, are trying to live whatever their unrealized goals or dreams were of themselves through their own child, and that child might not even have the same desire or passions or abilities. And so you see it in almost every meeting. You can translate that to school or to the arts or to theater. It doesn't matter. You're going to find that I think a lot of times parents are trying to give their children the experience they had, and that's not necessarily the wise path forward. But I do think that one of the key parts in this puzzle for all of us is going to be, as you said, the academy, right? I think we're going to need to see more colleges and universities, particularly some of the more prestigious ones, come out and say, look, this is our ideal profile of somebody that we're hoping to bring into our university. And then I think they're going to have to show proof in the pudding, right? Like it might not necessarily be the top performer. And so it's almost like we also need them to help us give more examples of that being true, because I do agree with you. I think that's an important piece.
One of the things, I used to track a lot about students going into college in different countries. Typically, your top students are not necessarily your most productive students. It's it's what we call the top 10 phenomena. Basically, they don't do much. If people come back to donate back to Novi School, are probably you're after the top 10 students, because those who are getting good grades, they will have to control themselves. They limit themselves to study what the test want, instead of experiencing a broader experience. And then we have broader experiences, you have more opportunities. You have more opportunities, you're luckier, as I was talking about. I think what we don't understand is human beings, when they run into opportunities, what do? When we talk about AI or any technology, when they pop up, that displace a lot of jobs, but they create new potentials. But who are the people who can take advantage of the new potential to do new businesses, to create new opportunities. That's why our schools don't teach. We have to teach people to say, this is a new technology. I can go and use this and redo it.
Yep.
And that's why education has generally failed. Because any technology has new potential, but that potential has to be taken advantage of by different kind of people.
Yeah, it's a great point. One of the things that I think about when we start talking about the future of education, and certainly you spent a lot of time in the ed tech space, you still live in that space a lot. What are schools going to look like? So if you were to, we're talking about redesigning some of our school buildings, our high school, kind of rethinking that a little bit. If you could start from scratch and you had an unlimited, you could wave a wand, what would your ideal school look like? How would you set it up if you were starting from ground zero?
Well, I think you first have to start is what is school for, right? Why do we go to school? And I think if you look at any happy, engaged adult, you'll find that they are doing something that aligns with their personal sense of purpose, but something they also have expertise in, right? So you can be, excited about something and do it as a hobby, but that doesn't bring home the paycheck.
Sure.
But if you have expertise in the thing that you care deeply about, then you're pretty much unstoppable, right? You're going to be the best person on the planet at that thing, and people are going to want your services. And I think even the parents who are really focused on college admission, if they track back their own story, they'll discover that the thing that they're doing now is a combination of purpose and expertise development. So if I was going to back that into school, one of the most important things you can do is give students hands-on experiences right now, early on, where they can explore their purpose and gain expertise. And what that means is you've got to break down the four walls of school. There's no way you can do that in a classroom. I mean, we are literally sitting in 4 cinder block walls.
Right.
If I wanted to gain expertise in something, I'd have a very hard time doing it. And I think connecting the inside of the school to the community outside of the school, to think of a learning community that includes the parents and the family and the faith community and the businesses and the nonprofits and the cultural institutions, and say, that's the learning community.
Sure.
Part of it is in the school building, but most of it is outside. And then redesign school so it's much more porous, so you can move in and out of that space is how I would go.
Which gets into whole hosts of conversations about seat time requirements and minutes and all of those things, which would be a fascinating conversation to have with you at another time. But
well, competency-based models have emerged, and many schools are doing competency-based. But I would really like to add another element of the communities should be really considered global. Novi is a beautiful place, but really your students, most of them live Novi. They will participate in a global community, and they will be doing businesses with many different cultures, different countries, and they will politically interact with others. And globalization is not ending. It's happening, just climate and environmental stuff. But another piece I just want to add is, today, multimodal is important. I think schools are still relying mostly on text. But really, you look at video, look at audio, we're doing podcasts. This kind of learning has not taken place. I mean, look at school, we still have a textbook.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's really shocking, right? But we've been advocating for TV literacy, media literacy. But really, that's most lip service. If you look at schools, we're still talking about the most traditional. I think in a new type of school, we have to rethink. And really, today's children spend more time on TikTok and Instagram than probably most other, text-based, we're complaining people don't read anymore, people don't write anymore. But this is a new society. We need to rethink about it. I just want one last story. I was in Spain, a reporter asked me, "Don't you think everybody should be learning Shakespeare?" I said, "No." I said, "You Shakespeare is a big deal, but how many countries do not even know who Shakespeare is? I mean, when they existed." So I think the idea of one type of thinking, one knowledge is good for everybody, I think we probably should move away from that.
That's a great point. I think both of you have touched on this idea of personalization. That is something that is a part of our strategic plan as a district. It's something we're really starting to have some more robust conversations around. And so you talked about expertise and passion, or purpose and expertise, which I love those words. Dr. Zhao, I read your book, Reach for Greatness. I think it's a great read. I would recommend anyone watching the podcast to read it. It really kind of does tie into this idea of purpose and expertise. I will say we've kind of added a third leg to the stool. When we talk about that, we're talking about a student's character as well. So, if we can think of education if we could build a student's awareness of who they are as people, their character, the strengths that they have there, as well as their purpose, right? What they're passionate about, what they want to do to impact the world in a positive way. And then also what is kind of their working genius or their expertise and things that they're naturally good at. If we can make it a goal to say that if school could help kids realize those areas, those three things, then we have a lot of different possible tentacles that they could go and they could do this. So talk about how we move into a place where we do have requirements, right, as a school system, as a school district, and those can be debated and we can talk about those. But as a school system, how do we move into this space of truly helping kids understand who they are and helping them understand what they're great at or good at so that we can help them develop greatness in some form or fashion?
Well, I think, pedagogically, I would always want to encourage the model, I've been trying in different countries is the idea that you start with finding problems. No matter what you teach in reading, writing, math, or you don't need to have those subjects, is that students look for problems worth solving. And they need to identify, they need to spend a lot of time struggling with that. I think a big problem with the traditional project-based learning is the problems normally were defined by teachers. So students really have no interest, no purpose. They're just doing work for the teacher. And so they can really look at themselves, what am I good at? What's my purpose? Why would I do this? And then second thing with finding problems, that a problem typically is for other people, for the world. So you're solving the problem. So psychologically, you're gaining self-actualization, self-transcendence. You create value. And that actually solves a lot of the problem of so-called mental health issues.
Sure.
Mental health is when you have nothing to do, you have mental health. When you're doing meaningful work, you don't have mental health.
Yeah.
The final point I want to say is that I don't think any school should change so drastic for everybody. So I've been promoting the model called school within a school. I think in Novi School, you have disengaged students. I am sure, no matter how good you are, you have disengaged staff.
Sure.
If you want to regenerate their fire, I would say, why don't we get together, build a new type of education? And the new education can spread, have a chance to survive and thrive, instead of imposing on entire school. I think our reforms have failed in many schools because they want everyone to change. We're too old to convince everybody. We want to just do it without trying to convince them. We don't want to invite resistance. We want to invite innovation.
Sure.
Yeah, I would point out a couple of simple starting points. So one is, if you think about how technology is being used in your school, it's most likely being used passively for the most part. The students are sitting, they're listening, they're watching. If you can swip that over and make that active learning with technology, where students are using it to collaborate, to problem solve, when they're given an assignment, they're not told, oh, write a paper on this. They're like, you can write a paper, you can record a podcast, you can make a presentation, you can shoot a video, right? You can create art. Suddenly, and here's a bunch of digital tools to do that, then you're taking a first important step. I think a second thing you can do is, if you'll spend just a little bit of time trying to understand a student's purpose, and then you can incorporate that in. So for example, I have a son who's obsessed with wolves, and he has been since he was in grade school. And he's actually very, very knowledgeable about wolves. And he had actually one of the the wolf experts in Yellowstone told him that he was in the top 10 people that he knew of who really understood the wolf family tree of Yellowstone.
Wow.
So that child walks into school, none of his teachers know that. They don't ask him. It's not in the curriculum. It never comes up. So here you have a wolf expert walking around your middle school, and nobody even knows.
Yeah.
That is a missed opportunity. And so it's the first steps are simple. Explore that and have a chance for the students to express that. So you know you've got a wolf expert. There's another student that I met who wanted to open a homeless shelter for youth. Another student I met who was really interested in microgreens and the nutritional possibilities they could bring to urban settings. Once you know those things because you've asked, then you can start to personalize to those interests. But you won't get there if you don't spend a little bit of time expanding the aperture beyond math, science, reading to what the students are actually passionate about.
In what we've said for a long time, we have to know our kids, right? We have to know our students and invest that time. I'm so grateful for both of you being with us today. I do want to give each of you an opportunity. If there's any kind of last comments you'd like to make, any projects that you're working on, for anyone watching this, maybe help people understand how they can follow your work a little bit more closely, and maybe get engaged with some of the research that you're doing. This has been so helpful for me, and I'm just so grateful to have you both here. But in closing, either of you have anything you'd like to throw out there?
Go ahead, Joseph.
So I'm excited to share some of the resources we have on the ISTE website. So especially, we didn't really get into AI to the depth that we might have.
Sure.
So if you go to ISTE.org/AI, we have a number of resources there that are really, really impactful.
It's going to be an entire series, I think, of podcasts and shows and training. If I am understanding correctly, you have toolkits and things available there for people that can access kind of some best practices and some of your work that you're doing. It's so important, and I'm so grateful for that. Not just for the students, but also for the practitioners, for the teachers and everybody else to be figuring that out. So appreciate your leadership in that area, and thank you for being with us today as well.
Thank you.
Well, I'm really right now pushing big changes through the school within the school model. So I have schools in China, in Vietnam, in Australia, in the U.S. So I'm really looking for individuals, staff, students who wants to have a different kind of education paradigm. I think that can happen in every school. That should happen in every school. If anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to chat with them, and they can find out on my website, zhaolearning.com, ZHAO learning.com, and happy to chat. Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you for being with us today as well. And thank you for watching. We hope that you were able to learn a little bit about maybe what's coming in the future of education. And as always, we hope that all of you will stay curious. Go Wildcats.